Valve has been working on VR big time, and some people are starting to worry about what that means for the Steam Deck. Can Valve continue to work on the Steam Deck as they begin the effort to launch a new piece of hardware? Do they even need to, or is the Steam Deck good enough as it is? I'm going to talk about that, but I'm actually more curious as to what you think, so definitely let me know in the comments. I'll give away some game keys to the best comments and highlight them in my next video, but honestly, that's not all. It's been a big week. Steam Deck celebrated another milestone. It's on sale again. Starfield's AMD's exclusivity could be good news for PC handhelds, even though it's bad news all around. The Verge wrote an in-depth story on the accessory maker that made their name in the Steam Deck Gold Rush, and I have a new upcoming aftermarket accessory that I am obsessing over. As usual, we'll start with the smaller stuff and work our way up. If you do enjoy these videos, don't forget to drop a like for the algorithm as I make my way to 65,000 subscribers. Let's get into it. What's good, Deck Gang? Let's start this episode off with some news about Sony's handheld, the Project Q. We know that this is Sony's streaming handheld, and ever since it was announced, the gaming community at large has had heated discussions about the pricing of this device, and it appears that Microsoft has been having these discussions as well. Stephen Totilo, who has been providing in-depth coverage of the Microsoft versus FTC drama, shared this snippet of a filing from Microsoft's legal team. The snippet states that Sony is anticipated to release a handheld version of PlayStation 5 later this year for under $300, and that price point is what's got a lot of people talking. It's important to note that Microsoft probably knows little more than we do about Project Q, but it's safe to assume they know the market and they study their competitor. Under $300 could mean a lot of things, but I think the safe bet that many people have been leaning towards is $250 or at the very lowest $200. I'm gonna buy it because I want to talk about it, but let me know, at what price point would you consider picking one of these up if you had a PlayStation 5? On the subject of Windows handhelds, there are a few important updates for the ASUS ROG Ally, including potentially an update on how it's been selling in stores. After a number of potential quality control issues that ROG Ally seems to be dealing with, ASUS has issued an in-depth response. They addressed the performance regression that was noticed after BIOS 3.19, the issue regarding the SD card reader potentially overheating, and the joystick dead zones that people have been complaining about as well. With regard to the performance degradation, ASUS seems to be saying that there actually is no degradation happening whatsoever. They go on to share a Cyberpunk test that should get you 39 FPS if you run the benchmark with their settings. Personally, I ran the benchmark and got between 35 and 36 FPS. Bill from NerdNest ran the same test and got 33 FPS. Some variance is to be expected, but this seems like significant variance and it's all in the wrong direction. Likewise, there was a problem with the Ally corrupting SD cards that sounds similar to a problem that the Steam Deck was having back during its launch window. There was a post made about this on the ROG Ally Discord where they say they have seen Ally fry cards or render them unusable in the Ally. The current theory is that the card reader is being overheated, but ASUS said they have not been able to replicate the problem, so they're asking for more information from users that are seeing this happen. Likewise, ASUS are still investigating the issue with dead zones. Funny enough, there are reports that Steam Input actually is able to fix the dead zone issue, but it appears that ASUS just hasn't been able to track down a root cause yet. So I'm curious, have you seen either of these issues? Another place where the Ally is following in the Steam Deck's footsteps appears to be community support. There was a cool looking battery clip from Panzer Husky over on the Ally subreddit. I'll leave a link to that because he provided links for purchase, but also links to the 3D files in case you want to print it yourself. It does look like that Reddit post has been taken down, but I'll leave links to everything in the description. In that same vein, the creator of the Deckmate has made a more generic version called the Ally Mate, which also works on other handhelds like the iNeo 2 and even the Steam Deck. iFixit published a comprehensive teardown, and they gave it generally a great review for repairability, including places where repairability was even better than the Steam Deck, including the battery and shoulder buttons. The display remained just as difficult to remove as the Steam Deck's display, and of course we should note that parts for the Ally are not quite as readily available as the Steam Deck, but repairability of the Ally seems to be in good standing overall. Finally, for the ROG Ally is a supposed leak with regard to the sales of the system. This was shared on the FanDeck Discord, and it comes from a video by Moore's Law is Dead, where he says that someone with insider info said this to him. At least here, in a major US retailer, the ROG Ally is selling badly. ASUS and AMD worked with us for tons of advertising, and yet this thing is selling at least 30% below stated expectations. End quote. Honestly, there's not much meat on the bone here, so I don't know what to make of this. Overall, I'd be pretty disappointed if it's not selling well. I have my fair share of concerns for ASUS specifically, but I'd like the world of PC handhelds continue to grow. Continuing on the subject of upcoming handhelds, it's been about 2 weeks since my last news roundup, so of course that means there's 3 new handhelds that have been announced or leaked. Honestly, this pace is getting insane, and I don't know how any company expects to do well with this many options being sold, but nonetheless, here is what's in store. A leak has confirmed that Anbernic is prototyping a new device named Win701, and this would be only their second PC handheld, the first being the Win600, which I reviewed a while back. This is a 7840U handheld that is unfortunately being paired with a 38 watt-hour battery. More interestingly, GPD announced a new handheld of their own, the 2023 refresh of the GPD Wind 4. The GPD Wind 4 is the Vita-like handheld with a keyboard underneath the sliding screen, and this 2023 refresh comes with either the 7840U or the 7640U. Finally is yet another offering from Aya Neo, this time the Aya Neo Air 1S. It's basically a refresh of their smaller Air line, and it will, of course, feature the most powerful APU out right now, the AMD 7840U. Before we get into deck news, let me tell you about today's sponsor, Micro Center. Most of you know about Micro Center, but it's basically a dream store for tech nerds with a selection of over 30,000 items, friendly in-store experts that can help you build your own PC, and same-day pickup if you order online. Of course, if you're new to Micro Center, then you can sign up and redeem a free 256GB SSD. June is Micro Center's laptop savings event. You can save hundreds on several laptops all month long, including $200 off this ASUS TUF A15 gaming laptop, which sports a GeForce RTX 4050 and a full HD IPS anti-glare 144Hz display. Additionally, they're offering a $25 coupon with no minimum if you submit your desktop build with a picture to their build showcase. If you have an awesome desktop in your house, there's basically no reason not to submit and get this coupon because there's no minimum and no strings attached. And don't forget, Micro Center is opening new stores soon. The first new store is in Indianapolis, and you can sign up now to visit the store and get a 128GB flash drive for free. So follow the links in the description to take advantage of these great deals at Micro Center. Thank you, Micro Center, for sponsoring this video. I'm going to kick off the deck news segment by letting you know that the summer sale is now live. This includes a massive sale on the Steam Deck itself. It's 20% off for the 512GB model, 15% off for 256, and 10% off for the 64GB. The 512 is an incredible deal, but then again, so is the 64 if you're willing to replace the SSD drive. I think I'll do a separate video telling you what games you should be picking up for the sale. In fact, depending on when this video is ready, maybe I've already released that video. But also, my friend High Tech Low Life is editing this news roundup, so maybe they'll sneak in some good games for B-roll. The Steam Deck's latest milestone is that it just passed 10,000 verified and playable games, including the recently released Trepang 2 and Proto Corgi. I continue to have some misgivings about verified, but it's a good system overall, and it's good to see Valve continue to make progress on this front. I also want to shout out 2 shell swap videos from fellow Nerd Nest podcast buddies. Bill has a video on the JSAUX shell, and the Fox has a video on the Extreme Rate shell. It appears that the tools in the JSAUX shell seem to be really good. Bill actually did this swap live on stream. It took him 7 hours, but the deck gang showed up to support him, including me. It was a lot of fun, and it definitely fired me up to do the swap too. Now I just have to find 7 hours in which to do it all. And the next aftermarket mod that has me really excited are these Artisan Steam Deck buttons being created by Colored Controls. You can go to steamdeckbuttons.com to join the waitlist and get a preview of what he's creating. Notably, these replacement buttons include the Steam Deck button, Quick Access button, and even a D-pad, which would be great for me because these 3 things have kind of remained my biggest complaints about the Steam Deck controls. These buttons are glow in the dark, and they're currently trying to figure out what colors to offer, so if you have a color that you want, let me know in the comments so that they can see what people are asking for. There's a new article on The Verge all about how JSAUX found success amongst a ton of copycat companies selling tech accessories, and that they did so by becoming synonymous with the Steam Deck, and the article really hits the nail on the head. The author points out that, quote, JSAUX intentionally beat Valve to market with a Steam Deck dock of its own, then feverishly iterated on it while fleshing out a whole ecosystem of accessories, and now that the company's established itself with a passionate subset of the gaming community, JSAUX not only wants to dominate other niches like PSVR 2, it's also pulling an anchor, building new sibling brands to reach entirely different categories, end quote. They also shared a new render of the upcoming RGB dock and RGB backplate, which are looking pretty slick, to be honest. Anyway, I found it really interesting that JSAUX was able to catapult into selling so many accessories, over 500,000 Steam Deck accessories actually, by aggressively targeting the Steam Deck niche. It certainly shows the power that we as consumers have. Next up is Starfield. In a year of big releases, Starfield is among the biggest, especially for the PC crowd. Naturally, that means that a lot of people have been wondering whether or not Starfield will be playable on the Steam Deck. It even came up recently when Kinda Funny Games interviewed Todd Howard. They asked him if Starfield will be Steam Deck compatible, and Todd responded, quote, "We'll talk about that later down the road," end quote. Well, even more recently, AMD and Todd Howard announced that AMD is Starfield's exclusive PC partner. This could potentially be good news for the Steam Deck and other PC handhelds using AMD's APUs. Unfortunately, however, this also likely means that DLSS will not be available for those that would play this on their desktop with an NVIDIA graphics card. What are your thoughts on this, and do you plan on playing Starfield on a handheld or on a beefier machine? Let me know. While we're on RPGs, Star Ocean: The Second Story R got a store page on Steam. This game was announced for the Switch during the Nintendo Direct, but it was immediately apparent that it would make it to the PC. Thankfully, not only is it making it to the PC, but the store page is already up on Steam with a release date of November 2nd. I'm digging the art style of this one, and am looking forward to it as an opportunity to finally get into the Star Ocean series. Penny's Big Breakaway is another game from the Nintendo Direct that I'm highly anticipating, and it also received a store page on Steam. This game is actually made by the developers of Sonic Mania, so while I am disappointed that they didn't get to make another Sonic game, I'm actually quite pleased that they came together for another commercial title, one that looks to be every bit as good, if not better, than Sonic Superstars. One title that we were sort of unclear on at first as to whether or not it would make it to PC was the Metal Gear Solid Collection Volume 1, but thankfully we did get confirmation that it was coming not just to PC but to Steam specifically. The Nintendo trailer definitely piqued my interest, considering they're including both the NES and MSX versions of the original Metal Gear games. More importantly, someone did some data mining on the MGS website and found references to MGS4, Peace Walker, and Metal Gear Solid 5 as well. Those references are not conclusive, and they should be taken with a grain of salt, but IGN further elaborated that they have heard that MGS4, Peace Walker, Ground Zeroes, The Phantom Pain are in fact the titles that are being planned for the Metal Gear Solid Collection Volume 2. Konami had lost my trust, but it seems that they're slowly working their way back with these developments. The last big PC related development from the Nintendo Direct is that Vampire Survivors now has a local co-op mode. By the way, that Nintendo Direct was one of my favorites in years. Super Mario RPG was my first RPG, New Super Mario Bros. U remains one of my favorite games of all time, and I have fond memories of playing WarioWare with family and friends, so in many ways that Direct felt specially tailored towards me. In any case, if you want to see more games from the Nintendo Direct that are coming to PC, including Hot Wheels Unleashed 2 and Persona 5 Tactica, check out this article from Steam Deck HQ. Link is in the description. And for today's main topic, I want to talk about big updates that Valve has been working on, but they're not related to Steam Deck. I want to address what that means for the future of Valve's initiatives and where the Steam Deck continues to fit into that entire picture. Recently, Sadly It's Bradley released a video where he discusses the extensive work that Valve has been doing in preparation for Deckard, their upcoming VR headset. I'm going to leave a link in the description, but the main points to keep in mind are this. Number one, Valve has been contributing or commissioning a lot of VR related work in Linux software like GameScope. Number two, a lot of these updates pertain to not just playing VR games in SteamOS, but also playing traditional non-VR games in a virtual room setting or virtual theater setting, including updates to a theater mode and updates to dynamic lighting and reflections to enhance that VR environment as you're playing traditional games. Number 3, Valve has recently made updates to Steam VR specifically that paint a better picture of how they are responding to Apple's Vision Pro announcement, especially as it pertains to Apple's spatial computing, which is how they're going to allow you to basically navigate a desktop of windows that you can place anywhere in the physical space that you're occupying. And finally, number 4, SteamOS is at the heart of all of this. And that kind of leaves a few questions lingering in the minds of the Steam Deck faithful. For example, what is the chip that's going to be powering this? Could it possibly be the same chip that's in the Steam Deck, and will that hinder Steam Deck availability? Or if they're working on all of these updates, then can they continue to work on big Steam Deck updates? And of course, how does this impact the goal of making SteamOS available for everyone? I think the short answer to those questions are that they're not using the same chip as the Steam Deck, so it shouldn't impact Steam Deck supply. They will continue to work on Steam Deck updates, but it might take a slight backseat, and I wouldn't place any bets on SteamOS 3 being available for general use anytime soon. I think that the chip that Valve will use is going to be a successor and therefore an upgrade to what's in the Steam Deck now. Mind you, I think this is why no competitors have been able to match the Steam Deck's low wattage performance. I personally believe that Valve and AMD have some sort of exclusivity agreement that keeps the Steam Deck chip, more specifically any of its successors, out of the hands of quote-unquote competitors. On the subject of Steam Deck updates, I believe that the upcoming SteamOS 3.5 is going to mark a big milestone for Valve. It contains a lot of huge updates, and overall it's probably the biggest update to Steam Deck since its release. On that same token, I could see Valve considering the Steam Deck software to be mature once that's fully available. Given that, I expect that Steam Deck updates will slow down considerably, but of course it will never really end so long as Valve continues to work on Proton compatibility, especially as it pertains to newer releases. And finally, I've said it before, but unfortunately I do not expect SteamOS to be generally available anytime soon. Naturally, I'd love to be wrong. Over 70% of you think it's going to be available this year or next. Personally, I think the list of things for Valve to address between now and the general release is just far too long. So I don't think Valve will forget about the Steam Deck, but I do think that the Steam Deck takes a bit of a backseat for a little bit while Valve goes all in on the Deckard, just like they went all in on the Steam Deck. They've shown that they can work fast when they're aligned on a single goal, and I think that the Deckard will be that singular goal for a little bit of time. So I've been playing a ton of demos from Steam Next Fest, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about my time with 4 of those demos. Lords of Exile was my biggest surprise. Even though I've been following the development of this game on Twitter for some time, the pixel art captures the 8-bit style of classic Castlevania spectacularly well, and the challenge was just right for me. Challenging sections were difficult the first few times, but the respawns were forgiving, and by learning the patterns you could eventually learn to clear a section unfazed, which would come in handy if you were trying to get the perfect bonus that they offered at the end of a level. The demo was nice and chunky, by the way, with 2 levels. It seems like the final game will have 8 levels total, but in classic NES fashion, I bet there's an entire endgame that begins at the end of those 8 levels. If Lords of Exile was the biggest surprise, then Sea of Stars was the demo that most lived up to its expectations. Inspired perhaps by Super Mario RPG, it has a timing system that provides a more engaging turn-based battle experience. What I found engrossing about the demo was how it encouraged the player to wander around the few locales that you do visit. You could just beeline from the beginning to your objective, but winding paths and hidden rewards give you a reason to look around. Overall, it seems the developers of The Messenger have another indie darling on their hands, and I can't wait until the full release lands on August 29th. Viewfinder is a gorgeous first-person puzzler that has you superimposing 2-dimensional Polaroid pictures to alter the 3-dimensional world around you. The tech feels like magic, and that's not something you usually hear software developers say, but it does. There's something about the way that it handles the complex task of mapping imagined geometry from your perspective to real in-game world geometry that feels like it shouldn't work, but it does. Unfortunately though, the demo puzzles fell a little flat for me. They're mostly tutorials until the last 1 or 2 puzzles. It ends on a high note with the last puzzle being the best, not just because of the challenge there is, but also because of the novel way it turns the concepts you've already learned. I suspect the full game will have more of that, and I can't wait to try it out. Death Unphased is a masochore platformer. Masochore is a subgenre whose name is a portmanteau of masochism and hardcore. Think Super Meat Boy, Spelunky, or Celeste and you have the right idea. Most of these games focus on speedrunning and this one is no different. I'm a bit hard-headed when it comes to these games and I stubbornly try to get S ranks on a level before pressing forward with the fear that I won't come back to a level to finish it later, so I might as well just finish it now. Don't be like me. This demo reveals several layered mechanics as you play through each of the levels, and you'll be surprised to find that the stuff that you learn later in the chapter can really help you knock down the time for levels that were earlier in the chapter. The demo for Death Unphased provides you with an entire chapter, which is like 20 levels, and overall is well worth your time even if you've played these games to death, and I'd say that's mostly thanks to the varied and layered mechanics that are a bit different than what I've seen from genre stalwarts like Celeste and N++. Check it out. Alright, I actually had a lot more I wanted to talk about in this video with stuff like the Microsoft FTC hearing and some new releases to Steam. If you want to see me make a more games focused news roundup, definitely let me know in the comments, or maybe just check me out on the Nerd Nest podcast tomorrow, where I'm sure we're going to be talking about all of that. That gang out. Goodbye!